All right, welcome back, everybody. So this week I'm really excited. I got Michael Smith from Milesi, and I know that we have a lot of Milesi fans out there. So, man, thanks for coming on and doing this. I think this is going to be really informative. I know I'm excited. I know we just briefly talked about some things that I'm still learning about y'all's products. So it's great to have somebody direct from Milesi on here to get us all straightened out.
Awesome, Eric. I'm happy to be here, bud.
Well, hey, real quick, what is I know you have a really long background in the wood coating industry. What's a quick background, some of the companies you worked for, like your specialty and what you like to do?
Okay, yeah, 28 years this past July in the coatings industry. I actually started out as a bench chemist. Never thought I'd be into sales. Was one of the lab nerds, so to speak.
Nice.
Really liked formulating the products. When the specifications and the HAPs and VOC started changing, they created a position to where I would go out and help recertify the coatings. Never went back into the lab. Always worked closely with the lab, but it kind of attritioned into an outside position, which turned into technical sales. Spent over 20 of my years basically with two companies. One of the companies today is a division of Axo Nobel, and the other one was with Gemini. Had some experience with Exalta finishes, but in 2017, I had the chance to join Milesi, and it's been a great venture for me so far.
Nice. Well, yeah. So we kind of met. We kind of met through Blake over at HGH in Nashville. Just had a few conversations early on, and then we got to talk more at the AWFS. And it was really cool to find out that you had been on the chemistry side of it. So that's really cool,
Right.
man. I really appreciate that side of it. And it's great to have someone with that kind of technical knowledge on your team. So. Well, first, let's start off by talking because I kind of feel like as far as like what we're calling the water-based revolution, you guys really, I think, have really started this whole thing when the products came in. How did that kind of come about? I know talking with Jeff, you guys have been at this a while. It just has taken a little while for it to catch on. But I think a lot of people don't know that you guys have been at this 5 or 6 years now.
Yeah, just a real quick background. Milesi's actually been in the U.S. since the late 90s, early 2000s. They were brought in through importers or partnered ventures. And then they really kind of got a foothold in the Northeast when they were coming in through an importer. Milesi made a vested interest into being a market share player in the U.S. So in 2015, they became a U.S. subsidiary. So that way, when they were coming direct to market. So we now have a brick and mortar facility in Chicago, and we're just growing it from there.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. So when did this, so kind of what happened with me is, I've been into water-based for probably about 6, 7 years. Always looking for better products, and I just happened to walk into HGH one day and was talking to Blake, the sales rep, and I said, "You got anything new?" And he's like, "Yeah, we got this Milesi product." And I was like, "All right, cool. Well, let me see it. Let me get some." So I ordered some in, and I kind of realized real quick that you guys kind of have a different approach. It was, a lot heavier viscosity. It's been a real learning curve for me. I've been kind of at this product for like a year and kind of learning like the best equipment to use and how to apply it properly. But it seemed like last year is when a lot of these products kind of caught fire over social media. And it's funny for me because I was kind of over here doing my own thing, and then there was a whole bunch of these chat rooms and places where these products got introduced, and so it just funny how it all kind of paralleled together and happened at the same time. You have any thoughts on that?
Well, it seems like the Milesi or the European style water-based technology really lends itself to be used really well in the architectural setting. So these guys that are wanting to spray water-based, that are doing stuff on site, The higher viscosity materials kind of give them a little more flexibility, because even though it doesn't technically say that you can brush or roll these products, in some applications you can, and you can also spray them. So it gives them a lot more versatility without losing chemical resistance or durability or anything like that. And I think that's one of the reasons, especially like in the refinishers chat room that I see sometimes on social media, that's why a lot of people are having success with it, just because of the versatility of the product.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I'm actually going to have Corey Leister. She's one that brushes and rolls your product.
She's awesome.
Yeah, and so I'm going to have her on, I think, next week, talking about that very thing. And it's funny, when I got introduced, and this was like probably right before AWFS, and I was like, brush and roll? Are you kidding me? You can't do that. So I was really surprised that, like you said, the versatility of this product. I actually never would have considered that. So it's really cool that there's people out there that are trying these things. And it actually came in handy for me on a job about a month ago. It was a laundry room. It was real tight, and it was frameless cabinets. And I was like, man, I'm just going to get out the roller and roll the fronts of these things on. And, man, it worked great. Didn't have an issue in the world. I mean, it's not quite as good as spraying. I feel like I could have added a few more, but you can do it, and it looks like I sprayed it. It works great.
And then you don't lose durability, chemical resistance, so you're not sacrificing the quality of your job. So,
yeah, and one thing about your product, the chemical resistance, especially on the 2K, is extremely high. And also, I want to bring this up because you guys are a big fan of Test Don't Guess, and you guys just went and got AWI. You sent your 1K in. Did you send the 2K as well?
We did.
Okay. And you scored really high on all of those. So why don't you tell everybody a little bit about AWI, because it's something that I feel like a lot of people don't understand. More people talk about the KCMA, but in my honest opinion, from what I've seen from the AWI, their testing is way more comprehensive, and to me is a better way to test coatings in the industry as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, well, the AWI is the Architectural Woodworking Institute. Just left their annual convention yesterday. It was up in Providence, Rhode Island. They had a great turnout. It was a great convention. They really cater themselves to all facets of woodworking, but finish is incorporated in that. So I'll speak to the finishing aspects. They do test. A lot of people know the old OP or TR scale. They're trying to, they're going to be adopting a new scale of how they rate finishes, and they're going to this process. It's called duty level. And if a coating scores within a certain parameter of this numerical scale of where the duty level falls, which will go through 1 through 4, if your coating falls in those parameters, it's good enough for that particular type of job that's spec'd. Duty level 4 being the highest, duty level 1 being the lowest. They test with 19 different 19 different types of reagents. The first 9 being regular household chemicals, the bottom 10 being like different chemicals, acids, pneumonia, things of that nature. Then they do a Tabor test, and then they do an adhesion test. So,
why don't you tell, because a lot of people watching may not understand some of the language that you're doing, but what is, can you explain to them what a Tabor test is so that people kind of get an idea?
Yeah, Tabor test is when you actually spray your finish on a substrate, whether it be wood or metal, and then they take that and they do a resistance test. It's basically like a scratch test, and they do so many rotations at so many different pounds until the coating fails.
Gotcha. And that's awesome.
Yeah.
I just really feel like that the way that they test finishes is way more comprehensive, and people will get a lot better idea about what their coating is going to do in whatever particular situation that it's going to be under with them than the KCMA, which really, they're not really testing finishes. They're more of like, it's a cabinet
Right.
Yeah. So, and I've done a video on that, and I'll leave a link below, but I appreciate that you guys are doing that. And I'd like to see, some other companies step up to the table and do that as well. But I think when we were at AWFS, you were showing me some of that, but I think a lot of stuff, you guys scored like all fives, like the highest that you could score.
We did. Well, I have some of the tests right here. I didn't do everything. I'm still tallying all that because we just recently got the data back. On the new AWI duty level, the highest that you can score is like a 205. That's on the reagent side. On the aromatic urethane, we scored a 197 out of 205, which 205 would be perfect.
Perfect, yeah.
Yeah, and even on the 2K water base, we got a 186 out of a 205. Nice. So both of those coatings would be specified today as a duty level 4, which means you could do any job.
Nice.
Under the spec with those. So.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that, and thanks for you guys, spending the time and effort to have that tested for us. We appreciate
Absolutely.
it.
We were happy to do it. So.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about the water-based products, and let's just kind of go through. Because a lot of guys that watch my channel, but then I also want you to talk about your solvent line as well, because you guys are doing some really impressive and unique things with the blockchain edition, and I want you to to explain some of that. But first, let's start off with just like the 1K, the HHSC series coatings. So let's kind of talk about the primer, and then I actually have a door here that is your all's 1K. And what I like, if I can get the light going right on this, I really can't. There we go. So this is 2 coats of the HBT 603, and then 1 coat of the 1K pigmented, and I'm not as familiar with your all's numbers because
it's HGT 6073 probably, which is the 30 Sheen.
Yeah. And one of the things that I really like about this coating is that of all the water bases that I've tried, the look and the feel of it is just amazing. I've talked a lot about, I like CIC, but I'll be honest, they don't have the look and feel that you guys have on your product. It may be a little bit more durable on the chemical side, but I still feel like the look and feel is just unmatched on your product. And it's interesting too to me because even if you get like a little dust nib or something in it, like it still feels good. It's like a lacquer.
Right.
It's amazing.
They've really worked hard in Europe on making the water finishes look and dry and feel like solvent. They put a lot of time and technology into that. So, we do have 200 chemists on staff in Italy.
Nice.
Yeah. So those guys have really done a great job with making these products dry and feel like solvent.
Yeah, I mean it's incredible, and I think that's one of the things that people really like about your all's products is that very thing. And then on top of that, they are, even the 1K to me is durable enough. I know everybody likes the 2Ks, but I actually don't use a ton of 2Ks. I'm kind of more of a 1K guy. But when the opportunity or when I need the 2K, then I also like that as well. Now, another thing that I want to talk about, and this panel's kind of got a bunch of stuff on it because it's been kicking around my shop, but one of the great things about your all's products is dark colors. Okay, been a tremendous, huge issue with the American manufacturers. I don't know one of them out there that dark colors works really well. It like thins the material out. You get separation. You get fish eyes. You get all kinds of crazy stuff. But you guys don't have that problem at all with your. And so, I mean, I pretty much, when someone calls me for dark colors, you guys are first on the list because of that. You want to speak about that a little bit? I know a lot of it has to do with you guys use the same type of resins in your colors that are in the finish, and that helps a lot.
It does. A lot of the domestic companies use a universal type colorant whether it's a 844 type colored or something that's close to it. They may be their own particular brand. But when you use a type of unquote universal type product, you're actually putting a coating or a resin into that film that really is not designed to be in it. So if you're doing something out of a clear base and you need 10% pigment load, well, the 10% of resin that's in that particular universal colorant will have an adverse effect on the coating, which I'm sure you've seen in the field.
Oh yeah.
To where it either dries slow, it'll turn glossy, it won't flow right. So what the European companies, or I can speak, solely to Milesi, is our colorants are specifically designed for our products. So on the solvent side, we actually have colorants that actually have urethane resin built into them. And it does two things. One, it allows us to do a higher pigment load. On the solvent side, we actually put 30% pigment load into a clear. With it having the universal, without using the universal and using our proprietary pigments, it also allows those colorants to cross-link with the coating once you've added the hardener, and then it allows the color to dry all the way through the film. So you're getting color from the base all the way to the top. And it's the same thing for on the water side. Instead of it being 30%, you still get a 20%. So we're still double what a lot of our competitors are. So, that's why we can take I'm sure you've seen the video where we take the white primer and put the Milesi red directly over it in one coat. Well, that's why we can get so opacity with one coat, is because we're able to put a higher pigment load without adversely affecting the coating.
Gotcha. Now, speaking of that, is there any advantage, like if you're going to do a straight white, by adding a little bit of color or pigment to it to help with that opacity? Because that's been a real issue that I've seen with tons of other manufacturers is that you do like a white and it just doesn't cover, which is, I'm glad you brought that up, because I don't see that as a problem with your all's coating. You don't have that issue. Like, I mean, I could almost sand through to the wood, put a top coat on it, and I'm not going to see through it. 90% of the other coatings out there, that's a problem.
Right. If you look at how, most of the stuff that Milesi has is really high solids. If you look at the viscosities and the coverage, a lot of times you're going to see that our top coats have a higher viscosity straight out of the can than our primers. And it's done that way by design, because they're designed to be higher solids. They're designed to cover well. And that way you can still get good build if you do burn through, and get that nice feel and still get the hiding and the look that you're looking for.
Yeah. And another thing I want to bring up too is, even when you're doing dark colors, even from my testing, I don't see any degradation in the quality of the chemical resistance and all that. It's the same. Now, other manufacturers, the darks, it's the deal's always been, and my recommendation is, you got to put a clear on it. But I don't feel like that's the case with your all's product. You don't have to put the clear on it. It's kind of, I mean, you can, but it's really not necessary.
No, and it goes back to, with us, the way we formulate the pigments, they actually cross-link with the film once you add the hardener to the base. So you're getting a good uniform cure from the top to the bottom.
Nice. So let's talk real quick, because this is a great time to bring this up. So a lot of us, I talked earlier about, struggling with the European system. Let's talk a little bit about application of your all's products.
Sure.
And we can get into the equipment side of it as well. A lot of people have a hard time with understanding the, 2 or 3 coats, depending on the wood of primer, and 1 top coat. Can you talk a little bit about that? And a lot of people ask me the durability, but what I've found is your all's primers are super durable in and of themselves. So it's like, you don't really need that extra, because your primers are made in a way that I mean, you could really use them as a top coat, kind of. I mean, obviously the sheen and the sandability and stuff, but I mean, that's kind of where I'm going. So I'll let you kind of expound on that.
And when we're talking about water, I'm always a fan. If you're going to do multiple coats, if you're doing a 2 or 3 coat system, I always recommend you doing most of your building with your primer. Uh, Finishing water base is different than finishing solvent. You have to take your raw wood, your white wood sanding a little bit differently, and you have to approach your finish sanding a little bit differently, or that's what I've learned to be true over the years. Um, I think the best thing to do with that is to always build with your primer coats, because you don't lose durability, especially in the 2K system. And that way, when you're putting multiple coats of primer down and you do one top coat, it's the most economical thing to do as well, because primers are a little cheaper than the top coats.
Is there a reason? A lot of guys keep asking me, what's the reason? Why not put 2 on? What's the thought process from European ideology on that?
A lot of times when you're doing top coats, they are not necessarily top coats, they're converters. So they're products that's made to have color put into them, as opposed to it being like a white, just a standard white that we're post adding color to. With that being said, a lot of times too, they're not made to sand as well as some of our non-converter products are, like the self seals that we promote. So if you're not careful with the way you finish sand them, you can telegraph scratches and things of that nature. It's not that you're going to hurt the coating or anything like that. It's just aesthetically, it may not perform as well as some of the coatings that we promote as a self seal or things like that.
Gotcha. That makes sense. And when you say converter, what does that mean from the Milesi perspective? Like
a converter for us is a temp base. Is a temp base, whether it's clear, because that's not necessarily the clear that you shoot to do a stain job or a natural job would be the same product that you use to do a black or a blue color in. We have specific products that are designed and formulated to take and hold color.
Right. And that's a great point to bring up. And that's one of the things that I've really learned over the past, I'd say, month and a half with the European system is you guys don't just say, here's a can, go have fun. Okay. Mm-hmm. You guys are making products tailored like a suit for particular applications. So I want people to really listen to that and hear that. That's why there's so many numbers. That's why there's so many products. It's like, if you need a coating that you want that natural look or zero sheen, you guys have a product for that.
Correct.
If you need a product that needs more vertical hang, or you need a 2-coat system, you guys have a matching product for that as well.
Correct.
So that's just something that we've got to keep educating the American market to understand that that's the reason for all the products, and it's not a one size fits all type of mentality.
No, it's not. And one of the things, with domestic type coatings, if you're trying to do a deep red or something that's non-pastel, and you need to have a higher pigment load, and you take it and put it in a 30 sheen product, well, about the time you add a 10% of a universal colorant, that product's no longer 30 sheen. If you actually ran it on a sheen meter, it's going to be much higher. So the Milesi, what they do is they formulate their converters to be at a certain sheen when it comes to before it's tinted, and by the time you build up that color, when it says 20 sheen converter, it's actually a 20 sheen finished product.
Yeah, and that's something I'm so glad you brought up, because that's one of the things that I've fought for years with water base is I get a clear. The clears tend to be kind of right there, but for instance, I'll give you a perfect example in the CIC line. Their 30 sheen in the pigmented looks different than their clear. So it's like you have to know that and adjust for whatever the person wants. So like a flat with them, which they say it's like between 10 and like 18 almost. So there's a wide range, and I don't see those wider ranges with what you guys are doing. When it's 20 sheen, it's
It's
20
20
sheen.
sheen.
Um,
Correct.
yeah, and that's something that you guys are dead on with, and I really like that when I know that I'm going to get the correct sheen. It makes a big difference. So yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up. That's a great point. So let's talk about application, because let's be honest, a lot of people struggle with the application process because they don't understand the right tools to use, or if they're using a tool that they realize that they may have to thin or add some type of reducer. So let's just start off on the air assisted airless side, and I'm going to talk about kind of what I've found. But first of all, let's go ahead and talk. You go ahead and talk and let people know, like, what are some of the ranges, the pumps that you need to be looking at, some of the tips. And I know that we're going to run into this thing with the Kremlin conversion with some of the stuff, but just
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is that you have, we can get that information to people on, transferring that. And CA Technologies actually has a really good, you can go on their website, and if you're a Kremlin guy, you can convert to theirs, or vice versa. If I say an 11, you can convert back to whatever it is in the Kremlin system. So go ahead, and what have you found with air assisted airless and water based that seems to be working well for guys in shops?
Okay. On the air assisted airless side, you need to be at a minimum of a 14-to-1 ratio on your pump. That way you can create enough. First of all, where you're lower is got enough volume to where you can create shear by pressure. So anywhere from 14-to-1 to 30-to-1 works really well with European water base. You want to be on the pump side. You want to be around a minimum of 500 pounds of pressure. I like to shoot it around 520, and then about 20 to 22, 23 pounds of triggered air. The reason why I say triggered air is if you have an air assisted airless and you mess on the air pressure side and match the gun, it'll go down like
Sure,
that. So
sure.
you need a little bit more than you would with solvent. Solvent, I would say you need 8 to 12 pounds. I like to bump that up to about double. That way, it helps with the atomization and breaking down the products. On the pigmented side, if you have a Kremlin system, a 12, 112, because I like to use the double orifice, the
Mm-hmm.
double atomizing tip. It actually will help pre-atomize the coating before it goes through the cat's eye, which gives you a little more shear, which helps the coating lay down and spray out. It gives it a more even spray. Um, that would be equivalent to like a Graco 515 tip or a 15-50 CA tip would be the
Okay.
same. And I think if you have an Anesto watt, I think they call it a 1550 as well.
Okay. All right. Great. So let's talk a little bit about that pre-orifice thing, because what I've found is that, to me, is if you're shooting flats, I don't feel like it makes so much of a difference. But on vertical surfaces, I feel like that's the key to get that really tight looking finish. I know some guys have kind of complained that it doesn't seem to lay out as nice, but me and a bunch of guys have messed with a whole bunch of things, and that's where we're finding the best luck on those vertical surfaces. And there's a name for that, and I'm going to probably mispronounce it, but it's Thixotropic. Is that
Thixotropic.
Thixotropic? There you go.
Yes.
I mess it up every time. So can you explain to guys what that actually means and how that works, and that's what the point of that pre-orifice is?
Yeah, Thixotropic is relative to viscosity. If you look at the European water bases, and I know you've shot a lot of them, and one thing that you would see that's universal between Milesi or Renner or some of these other guys that have good technology is water bases have high viscosity.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why that is because we can't put things like nitrocellulose or CAB, acrylic butyrate in them to help them stick to the wood to get vertical hang. Okay. So we have to do it rheologically by adding products or additives that make the product thixotropic. So the higher the viscosity, it'll lay to the wood. The thinner domestic coatings, if you spray those, 3.5, 4 mils, 4.5 mils wet on a vertical surface, they're going to sag.
Yeah.
So so our coatings are thixotropic like that for the vertical hang. So so that goes to what you're saying. When you're spraying horizontal, you can get a good wet 5 on there and you don't have to worry about runs. Well, by setting your pumps up properly and understanding why we have higher viscosities and using these tip sizes, you can still spray these coatings at 5 mils vertically and get the proper atomization and shear from them, and they still flow out like they would if you're spraying a horizontal surface.
Yeah. And something else I want to add to that, and then I'm going to show, I got a couple of guns here, and some things that, like I said, Matt Slater, you know who Matt is.
I do.
And
Matt does some great work.
Yeah, and if you guys don't know who Matt Slater is, you need to go on Instagram and follow him. Me and him, we talk like at least 2 or 3 times a week. Hey, man, I tried this and it blew up, and I tried that and it worked and it didn't. But, man, he's got the Milesi stuff. I call him the Milesi master, because he's laying it out, and it's beautiful, the work that he's getting out of your all's coatings. And he's using the whole line. He's using your stains. So if you don't know who he is, go follow him. Make sure you get to know who he is, because he's an amazing finisher. So anyway, I got so sidetracked on that, I forgot where I was going. But with the gun, so I have the CA. This is the Cougar, and I also have a Bobcat. And the pre-orifice with these works really well. But we ran into another one. I don't know if you're familiar with the Wagner GM 4700. So I shot with this yesterday on a job, and I was able to, now with this gun, I'm up there with the pressures that you're talking about, 20, 25. All right, this gun, this was a 410 tip on it. And it has the pre-orifice in it, and it has a high solid air cap on it. And I was able to take my air pressure down to, I think, around 15 with this. And I did some testing yesterday with it has a red cap as well. And this gun atomizes your all's product beautifully. And Matt actually, we switched to that, and we ended up talking with Ty from Total Finishing Solutions. He's kind of an expert in the assisted airless and reciprocating spray lines. And he deals with a lot of different coating manufacturers. I think he's dealing with one of your all's distributors somewhere, because he tagged a post that I put in last night. So he's familiar with the Milesi line, and because we've been talking with him about it. But I would recommend, if some of you guys, if you want to get some lower air pressures, because one of the reasons why we were looking at that is because, you're spraying inside of boxes.
Right, you get less bounce back and everything.
Yeah, so that's kind of what we were after with that. Now, we haven't been able to test the Anesta Wada. I know you've used the Anesta Wada, and I haven't got to see the Kremlin, but hopefully at some point. I got the Anesta Wada rep here from the guys over at HGH. Sam, he gave me it, and I'm gonna be talking to them about that. So, and what I'm finding as far as fluid pressures are the same as what you said. It's just a matter of, and I'm actually using the little CA pump, the blue one. If I had it to do all over again, I would probably go with a higher ratio pump, knowing what I know now. But at the time, I just didn't know. So I'm making what I have work, but it's working really well. But anyway, so let's talk about if you're going to shoot with an HVLP, not a turbine, but a cup gun. And what I've found with that is that, you want like a 1.7 or higher and you want a gun that has good, like, high flow rate to it.
Correct.
That's going to put out a lot of product. Because that's kind of the secret, if you will, to this is if you want it to flow out nice, you have to put it on heavy. If you put it on at 2 wet mills, it's not going to flow out and look right. It's going to have that grainy kind of feel to it. But I know you've done a lot of work with cup guns, way more than I have. So would you talk a little bit about that? Because a lot of guys, they don't have the money to get into an assisted airless, and they're trying to make work what they have. But give us some perspective on that.
What I found that works the best with just your regular gravity fed type guns, it'll be different in a siphon, but in a gravity gun, I personally have found that a 1.8 works really well with a 5% reduction with distilled water. That tends to work really, really well with the Milesi type coating, especially in the pigmented side. I actually had a chance last week to test a pressurized gravity-fed cup gun for the first time. Basically, where it has a hose that runs from the cavity of the gun up to the top of the spout, and it'll put air pressure from that down into the gun, and it pressurizes the cup. I found that with that, you're running about a max somewhere around 20 pounds of pressure into the gun, and it pressurizes it to a point to where you could probably go down to a 1.6, 1.5 and get the same result. So that was the first time I had a chance to play with that type of technology, but it worked really well. Awesome. I did it first with a 1.8, and it was coming out like a fire hose. So I was like, hey, we need to change the nozzle size on this.
Right.
So pressurizing the coating really does make a difference.
Yeah. And getting back to that Thixotropic thing, the way it's explained to me is that it's kind of like a glass ketchup bottle, and you're trying to pour it out, and when you punch it and hit it, it thins it at a moment and allows it to run out, and then it goes back to its original state. Is Correct. That a pretty good
that's what I've never thought of it like that, but yes, it's the same way. If you took a ketchup bottle, how many times have you seen somebody turn it upside down with the cap still on it and pop it a couple of times, and then you're pressurizing it to where it come out? So it's the same theory. Yes.
Yeah.
Pretty good analogy, Eric.
Yeah. Well, actually, I can't take credit for that. Ty from Total Finishing Solutions came up with that, but I'm stealing it. So, but I am going to give him credit. But yeah, that's the way he explained it to me, and I thought that was a really good explanation. But one of the things too that I have found, I have the whole, I don't know if you're ever on Instagram, but I have the Harbor Freight man, which is my alter ego, and I shoot a whole bunch of coatings out of the Harbor Freight guns just to be funny. But you can actually shoot this stuff out of a Harbor Freight gun. But the trick is that you've just got to make more passes.
Correct.
You can't just do one pass and call it good. You got to make multiple passes. And that's actually something that I kind of learned that was reinstilled when I went to visit MK Sales, and I had a couple Italian guys there. And I was like, no, I want to see you guys shoot this stuff. And that's what they did, because we were using it was a Kremlin HTI with like a 1.3, and it just wasn't putting out enough flow. So, I mean, they did like multiple passes, but they knew what it should look like, how many wet mills. They had a good gauge of that. So they just kept putting it on until they got it. Now, obviously that's not going to work in a production setting. But you can make it work. You just have to do more passes.
And the key to the water-based finishing is, like you said, it's doing forums like this to where people who really haven't had experiences or tried it without doing any research. That's why they struggle at times, because you're still trying to finish these coatings with the way you would finish a domestic type water base.
Right.
And it's just not going to work.
Right.
But if you get the right tool to do the job, and you look at how we're setting these things up, you'll have great success.
Yeah.
And so I just I appreciate us, everybody like you and everybody trying to get the word out on how to actually apply these coatings.
Sure.
Because at one point in time, everybody, that was the thing. These coatings are great, but how do we apply them? So getting the word out is 90% of it.
Yeah. And I mean, Once somebody gets it and they feel it and they see it, they're sold.
They're sold.
Because it's such an amazing. So while we're talking about that, one of the things that I've been running into is high gloss stuff. And now, as far as I know, and I haven't shot y'all's, but your all solvent high gloss is probably one of the best on the market, period, the end. I've heard that from people that, are not even Milesi guys that'll say, oh, no, you need to, the Milesi is the way to go. But this is an example of the water base on a piece of flame birch. And this is one coat. I did 2 sealer coats. If I had to do it again, I feel like using the sealer kind of clouded it up a little bit. I should have just gone straight with it, but I just wanted to see what would happen if I built 2 sealer coats and 1 top coat just to see and test it out. But it came out really great. And this is one thing, the reason I'm bringing this up is we're talking about reduction as well, and it's going to kind of tie in with where I'm going to go with this. If you're using a HVLP, a true like turbine system, is that one of the things with the water-based coatings is that you can get little bitty pinholes in gloss, okay? But it can be resolved, and I don't think a lot of people know this, by slowing it down on your final coat. So let's talk a little bit about that, and then we're going to switch over, and I want you to talk about the solvent lines and some of the stuff that you guys are doing in that arena.
Okay, yeah. We do have an actual retarder in the Milesi line. It's called LTC5. The one thing you need to know about LTC5 is anytime that you use it, it doesn't need to be added straight to the coating. It needs to be pre-mixed with water. I know some people in certain applications use it 50-50. I like to use it 4-to-1. So you mix it 4 parts water to 1 part of the additive, and then add a total of 5% of that mixture to your coating. If you add any type of propylene glycol or an glycol ether type product to a water-based coating and you add it straight, if you don't have it mechanical stirring, you can shock it and you can cause it to gel up on you. So by pre-mixing the additive with water will help prevent that. So that's why we recommend that practice.
Yeah. And we were talking kind of before we came on with this that, your suggestion, if you're going to use the water-based high gloss, is on your final coat to do that 50-50, and then a 5% reduction. Now, while we're on that, let's talk about the turbine system. Now, probably the master of the turbine system that is on social media has got to be Shane Woods.
Shane Woods.
He's Shane the Gunman Woods, man. He's got it going on. So if you don't know who he is, he's on Facebook. He also started putting some of his stuff on YouTube as well, so you can check him out there as well. But he's the master at that, and he's got all the ratios figured out if you want to know how to shoot the Milesi product. Now, what he's kind of doing, and I would, refer to him on this because, like I said, he's the master of that. But he's generally tip size-wise using a 1.5 to 1.8, and he's doing a 5% LTC 5 at the max, and then 5% water, mixing that. But one of the things you don't want to do with your coating is go over that 10% mark. Now you can, but you're gonna degrade the coating, and it's gonna lose, the chemical properties and the durability of it. Is that correct?
What's mainly gonna happen is the reason why we don't want you to go over 5% is if you're spraying boxes and you're doing vertical, you lose the vertical application properties of the coating. So if you go 10 or 15% reduction and you're spraying horizontal pieces, you're probably going to be okay, but you're going to lose your vertical hang. So that's the main reason why you don't want to go over that. So when you're spraying at 5% and you can spray 5 to a heavy 5 to 5.5 mil wet without getting a run, if you go 10 to 15% and you spray it the same, that coating's not gonna hang. It's gonna run.
Gotcha. So you're going to be back to the American system.
Yeah, exactly.
So a lot less coatings, which in turn is going to lower the solids and require more application. So I think that's something to consider. All right, so we've talked a lot about water-based, but now you guys have some really unique stuff going on in your solvent line, and you guys have got like a 2-coat pre-cat system, which I have shot, and I have shot your all's 2-coat 2K system, which is amazing as well. And I actually shot that one out of a Harbor Freight gun. It came out beautiful. So why don't you talk about, I know a lot of people are curious about what is the blockchain edition?
Oh, the unicorn.
There you go.
The unicorn. Yeah, BCA, blockchain edition. I really can't add a whole lot of technical aspects to the BCA because a lot of it is still not filtered down to me about how it's formulated. One thing I can tell you is it's a resin system that's based on pH levels. It's not a water-based system, but it's technically not solvent neither. It's some kind of hybrid coating system. It does have some solvents and things in it, but they are not classifying this as technically a solvent or a water-based coating. When it's applied, it doesn't have your residual dry times. It basically is wet, and then when it's dry, it's dry. And once it hits that dry cycle, it's basically stackable at that point.
Oh, wow.
So it's basically a product that is more durable. It has more scratch resistance than an aromatic urethane. It has the clarity and the light fastness of an acrylic urethane. So it's the best of both worlds wrapped into one coating. And it has a 72-hour pot life once you mix the two components together.
Yeah, that's what you were telling me. We were talking on the phone one day that it's gonna. That's one of the things, like the drawbacks to, some of the guys don't like the 2Ks. That's kind of one of the drawbacks for me. It's like, okay, I got 2 hours, or I think the solvent one's a little bit longer, right?
Yes,
the solvent.
Yeah, the solvent. You're depending on what you're doing. As of today, on the aromatic side, is 4 to 6 hours, depending on the product selection.
Yeah, but 72 hours. That's
huge.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's huge,
so
especially for a production shop.
Yeah, we just recently had that coating submitted to the AWI to have them tested as well.
Awesome.
So I'll be looking to see what the feedback is on that as well.
Yeah, nice. All right, so real quickly, what are we looking at from other new products that you're coming out with? I know that you had talked with me about some possibilities of some new water-based stuff. Is that still in the works?
Still in the works. They are coming out with some new products in 2020 on the exterior side. In the water-based, we're coming out with a new a decking coating. We're coming out with a better color palette for the all-in-one, 3-in-1. Some people call it that, to where we can do opaque colors in that. As of last year, we were mainly doing transparent type colors, mimicking stain colors and things of that nature. So we're going to be doing some opaque capabilities with that product. On the solvent side, the big thing that's going to be coming out that I don't know if I should share it on this forum or not, because I know my competitors are listening.
All right, but don't do it. But
that's okay.
All right,
it's 24-hour pot life urethanes in pigmented.
Awesome.
Nice. Yeah, so we're going to be introducing a white that's a 24-hour pot life.
Awesome. Well, one quickly, I'm glad you brought up the exterior thing, because that's like the Achilles heel of the American coating system and how we apply things. And we just haven't had a lot of luck. But the European technology takes a lot different approach to exterior. Would you talk about like the application methods of an exterior product and how it differs, and how you're getting a lot better results with a European system than we have traditionally with the American coating systems?
Sure. It basically starts at the wood. When you're doing a color selection, or even if you're doing a natural finish, one of the most important things that I've learned from working with the Europeans is the impregnator or the stain color that you choose is 50% of the battle of maintaining and having a good long lasting clear coat finish or the clear coat system that you use. So we have a stain that it's called an impregnator, and basically what it is you can achieve color or you can do it in the clear, and you apply that to whatever it is that you're doing, whether it's a door, a window, soffit, what have you. And what that does is it'll actually inject, mildewcide, biocide, algicide into the wood, into the joints, into the cracks, into the crevices. So when you put your clear coat on and this product's fighting the elements, whenever there's rain or wind or sun that's getting down and trying to deteriorate in those cracks, that impregnator's fighting that off. It's keeping your product from molding. It's keeping your product from mildewing. And that's 90% of where your failures happen.
Sure.
I've seen more times than not that somebody will take a Minwax stain and use that as a color, then try to put an exterior coating on top of that, and then 6-8 months later, they're having to redo it again. And it's failing because, for one, you shouldn't be using an interior stain in an exterior application. So choosing that base foundation is 90% of the battle.
Yeah, it's interesting. I did an experiment. It's probably been 5-6 years ago where I took 3 different products and I stuck them on my roof for a year. And interestingly enough, that's kind of what happened even on my roof with those elements, especially an oil type. It started growing the algae and the mildew, and it just kind of broke the finish apart. And then, of course, and that was probably an extreme experiment, but it was funny. I turned them over on the back and they were all perfect. So that was really, really interesting. But I think that's huge. And I want people to hear that that's the key to having, a longer lasting. And then also you guys also have a line, the 3-in-1, right? That it's maintainable by applying the top coat again, right?
Correct.
Am I correct?
You can use it for new construction and for maintenance and renewals. So that's and it's also an impregnator, sealer, and top coat built into one. So that's why some people call it all-in-one or 3-in-1.
Gotcha.
So that's what that is. So yeah, it's a really versatile product. It's a durable product. It holds up really well to the elements. So,
but also what I hear you saying is that even on the stain side, it is a impregnating type stain. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. So you're getting that. So it's not just a run-of-the-mill stain. It actually has these elements that you're discussing in it that helps fight against the mold, the sun, the rain.
Right. And that is really important. And another thing that's equally as important is doing all 6 sides. Yes. You have to do all 6 sides. You don't know how many times I've seen where the top of the door or the bottom of the door is not finished or at least protected in some way. And you can get the elements. They beat you up from the inside out, not the outside in.
Yeah.
So you've got to protect it so it has a chance to survive from the inside out.
Yeah. I mean, that was one thing I learned very early on from some of the guys that taught me was whatever you do to one side, do to the other.
Correct.
And it keeps you from having all kinds of, it's a moisture imbalance thing. A lot of it is. I mean, look, wood moves. I know there's a lot of guys out there that have come from the house painting system, and they're learning about expansion and contraction in wood. I was fortunate enough that I came from a cabinet background and a furniture background, and that was just beat into my skull. You have to leave room for expansion and contraction. So,
correct.
A lot of stuff that these guys are doing, I just kind of shake my head, but they're learning. And I'm really glad I saw a post yesterday that I thought was great where a guy had cut apart a door, and he was showing the expansion gaps between like a 5-piece wooden door and how you leave 1/8 of an inch inside those panels because, even in a climate environment those panels are going to move, and especially on a door. I mean, the thing can shrink almost to an eighth of an inch. I've seen that. You put the door in the summertime, and in the wintertime, it's hitting, or vice versa. So I think that that's an excellent point to bring up, that you've got to seal all sets. Whatever you do to one side, you do to the other.
And that what you said kind of segues into the interior finishing as well, especially into kitchen cabinets. We've talked a lot about the European movement and why we're seeing European finishes, segueing itself into cabinet finishing and millwork finishing, and a lot of it has to do with what you just said. If you're doing a face frame job, or if you're doing a 5-piece door job, is the movement that you get from the doors and the joints. With thin film technology, when you're talking about precats and varnishes, those coatings are made to drive very, very hard. Well, there's a reason why you can only build them. You can't exceed 4 dry mills, because they're so hard. When the wood moves, that coating's going to crack with it. I mean, how many times, Eric, have you seen in the field where you've seen a job to where you sprayed it with precat or varnish, and those joints have been compromised? Mm-hmm. Well, that's where you get your finish failure. It's not okay. You can be chemical resistant from the outside in all day long, but if you lose that integrity of that joint, you're going to deteriorate from the inside out.
Sure.
And with urethane coatings, we're building these things in gloss applications, 12 to 16 dry mills. So even though we're super chemical resistant, we're also super elastic. Yes. So when it comes to a cabinet job, when those doors and those joints are expanding and contracting, if you finish those with urethane, that joint has a greater probability of not breaking. So if it never breaks, you don't never have a chance of moisture failure. So that's why you see a lot of people in the cabinet industry moving from even precat and varnish strictly to urethane, because they're not wanting callbacks, or they're tired of the cabinet around the dishwasher failing and things of that nature. So
yeah, and I just had a guy yesterday send me a picture. I won't specify the company because it doesn't really matter. They all do it. I've seen it. I've done kitchens. I did one time where it was a refinish job on oak, and the manufacturer, whoever it was, they didn't glue the cope and sticks together. They just pin nailed them. Right. And so what happened was I finished them in the wintertime, and when the summer came and they opened up right there where the cope and stick comes together, it just literally popped the finish right off. Right. Literally. Now, a lot of people won't believe me, but it happens. And that same thing happens in your dishwasher, especially with the steam. A guy sent me a picture yesterday. He's like, man, what's going on with this? We used a vinyl sealer and we're using the precat. And I said, well, it's the steam. It's getting in the wood. And then when it's drying out, it just basically cracked the finish right off. So yeah, these are the things, man, that's such a great thing that you brought up. And that's one thing I've seen a lot with, these coatings is like, when you do that little, I do the little, adhesion test and I cut everything up. Like, these coatings aren't chippy. They have a lot of, you can pick at them all day. And that's one of the hallmarks that I've seen, because you guys are using a more polyurethane type base, which has that flexibility instead of the acrylics, which they get harder and brittle over time. So
yeah, we are using, and this is another thing I wanted to talk about before, and I wanted to make sure we touched on this, and it is isocyanates versus formaldehyde.
Okay, yeah.
A lot of people really, when they hear isocyanate, they get scared. Back in the 70s and 80s, and even in the early 90s, when domestic companies made urethanes, they would take a urethane resin, and we would take a product like a Desmodur type hardener, which is an isocyanate hardener, and we would add it to cross-link it just like we would a varnish. And that is what you call a free isocyanate. Free isocyanates are super carcinogenic. They're not really what I would recommend spraying without proper PPE and things of that nature. If you look at any Milesi hardener, and you look at the data sheet on it, you'll see that our hardeners are 25 to even 32% solids. And the reason why that is the Europeans found that if you take a particular resin and blend it with the isocyanate in the manufacturing process, that it changes the molecular structure to where that isocyanate is now bonded isocyanate. So when you're mixing part A and part B together, now you're working with bonded isocyanates, not free. And this is pretty much a good rule of thumb for all the European companies. So just make sure that I want to make sure that they knew that they were dealing with bonded isocyanates and not free. So bonded isocyanates are I'm not going to say it's not bad for you, because all coatings are bad for you.
Sure.
But it's not the boogeyman that everybody brings it out to be. There's been studies done in Europe to where you spray a bonded isocyanate coating versus a formaldehyde coating, and the bonded isocyanate coating was less carcinogenic than the formaldehyde.
Yeah. So when I was at MK Sales a couple of weeks ago,
I'm sure Brian was saying the same thing.
Yeah.
Correct?
Well, so we straight up asked the Italian guys that were there, and we said, what's worse, formaldehyde or the isocyanates that you use? And they said 100% the formaldehyde. So in reality, if you're shooting, let's just say a run-of-the-mill vinyl sealer or precat, what's coming off that is more carcinogenic than the isocyanates that are in the water-based material. I don't know is it the same way with the solvent as well?
It is.
Okay.
And you're always dealing with bonded isocyanates.
Right.
It's not free. I mean, the amount of free isocyanate that comes off is minute.
Yeah. And so that people understand that, can you simplify or like give an example? Because I may not understand that terminology. I mean, I understand what you're saying. It's basically what's the word I'm looking for? It's trapped in the coating. Is that a good way to?
It's I don't know how to. It's just molecularly bonded into the coating, into the hardener. If you ever took a hardener and spilled some of the solvent hardener on top of the can, you'll see how it dries really hard. Yeah. It actually has a film to it.
Yeah.
Well, that's basically what it's doing. It'll cross-link itself.
Gotcha. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's where a lot of that comes in is where the car industry was kind of the one that started with the free isocyanates, and people were killing over dead in 6 months or whatever. But the technology that's out there now is very different from what's going on now. So, but yeah, I thought that was a pretty interesting point. And I want to promote, safety as long and all of these companies want to. But I'm glad that you brought that up. Well, Michael, we're kind of out of time today, but man, I really appreciate you guys, the whole Milesi team, Jeff, Jacob, and you, and I know there's other guys on the team that I don't know as well, and I'm hopefully I'll get to know some of those guys, but I know you three pretty well. But thank you guys for coming on and doing this, and I look forward to having you. I think Jeff said he's going to do one, but he wanted you to handle the technical side. So
I understand.
And before we go, and I didn't mean to cut you off.
Of course.
Where one of the things that I run into a lot is like we need to get some kind of distributor list. And I think Brian Kuhn, you guys have been talking in the professional finishers chat room. So if you're not a part of that, I think you guys might want to go over there. You guys are working together to get something together for that, right?
To my knowledge, that's already been done.
Okay, great. Awesome. So, because I have people all the time ask me, and then I just usually tag somebody else and say, hey, this guy will take care of you.
Right.
But we really appreciate you guys sharing the knowledge. And, man, I love your guys' coatings. It's a pleasure to use. Once you understand the proper way to apply it, it's really easy. It really, really is. There's nothing complicated to it, and you're going to get a superior looking and feeling product and durability wise, what we've talked about. Anything else you want to add?
I'll just say, thank you for having us on. We encourage the type of work that you're doing, and we really appreciate it. If anybody out there has any questions, I try to make myself as accessible as I can, as do all our teammates. So if you have anything, just feel free to get in contact with us. I'm on both of those refinishers chat rooms. I'm on LinkedIn. Um, I'm on Facebook, even though, as Eric could tell you, we're friends on Facebook. I don't post a whole lot of work stuff on there. It's more for my personal life.
Yeah,
but,
yeah, that's cool.
But I'm totally accessible, so feel free to contact me if anybody has any questions.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks again, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Eric.
All right.